I now give the floor to His Excellency Badr Ahmed Mohamed Abdelatty, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Immigration, and Egyptian Expatriates of Egypt.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, heads of delegations, President of the United Nations General Assembly, Mr. Philemon Yang, Mr. Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General. I speak to you from this rostrum at a critical time, at a time of a complex crisis underway in the Middle East and stretching out beyond. Egypt is a country rooted in history, but also a forward-looking country. We've gone through many wars, we've faced many challenges. As a result, justice and peace are our lodestars as we seek to build a region and a world that's rooted in dignity, freedom, and justice. I'll be speaking on behalf of one of the founding members of the United Nations. You're all well aware of the role we played in the establishment of the United Nations, in the establishment of consensus, and the UN's establishment in Africa and Arab states and developing countries. We're very much in favor of preserving an effective multilateral system and stable international relations underpinned by respect for international law and expansion of peace and cooperation. Thus, we believe it is necessary to ring alarm bells at this specific moment, given that the international system, established roughly 8 decades ago, is currently showing its structural shortcomings, threatening its very existence, and this owing to ineffectiveness, inequality, and growing recourse to double standards. Young people the world over are asking legitimate questions about the usefulness of the international multilateral system and what it yields for today's world in terms of peace and security. Is it helping to eradicate poverty and hunger? Is the system protecting us against climate change? Is it helping to build knowledge? Is it helping us to adapt to technological changes? We're seeing occupation, terrorism, killing, and destruction. Is this being prevented? Is the system unified? Is it transparent? In order to answer these questions, which are very legitimate, and they were addressed, in fact, during the preparations for the Summit of the Future. In fact, one of the outcomes of the Summit of the Future is very positive. It was a positive step towards revitalizing and rendering more effective the international multilateral system with the United Nations at its heart. If I may, I'd like to sketch out our vision for restoring trust and credibility and combating double standards. A vision which can help us to renew our multilateral system and bolster its capacity for building a brighter future for our people. It's underpinned by 5 key principles. First of all, we must recognize that there is no alternative to the multilateral system. Global challenges are interdependent. They know no borders. They go beyond the capacity of any one state or any group of states to address them. Thus, it's necessary to recognize that the integrity of the United Nations, underpinned by its legitimacy and its very existence, all of this is at stake. Israel's brutal aggression against Gaza, underway for almost a year now, as well as the current attack on the West Bank, are shameful. They place shame on the international community and its institutions, which are unable to do the bare minimum to put an end to this aggression. The international community took months to start asking for an end to this brutal aggression. We staunchly condemn the Israeli escalation. It's dangerous and it knows no limits. It is pushing the region to the brink of the abyss. We categorically reject and strongly condemn Israel's current aggression vis-à-vis Lebanon. This is a flagrant violation of Lebanon's sovereignty, its territorial integrity, its unity, and its political independence. Our overarching priority, as things stand, is to put an end to the bloodshed. Immediately, without any conditions, and permanently. We're strongly opposed to any attempts to resolve the Palestinian issue through forced displacement or population transfer. We attach particular importance to the unconditional and immediate delivery of medical and humanitarian assistance to civilians who are not bearing weapons in Gaza. Egypt has undertaken substantive mediation efforts together with our friends Qatar and the United States. Unfortunately, these efforts were thwarted by Israel over the course of several months. We'd like to reiterate that the establishment of an independent Palestinian state based on 4th June 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital is the only way to achieve a comprehensive and just solution, restoring stability to the region and to the entire world. Because this issue is of utmost importance. It lies at the very heart of the conflict in the region. I cannot but commend the Secretary General for his very courageous stance, which shows that he's shouldering his responsibility. I'd also like to extend our gratitude to all UN leaders and UN agencies, specifically UNRWA. We extend our condolences to the families of those martyred UNRWA personnel who fell during their duties and others who fell owing to the Israeli occupation. We want to put an end to the war machine, to put an end to the destruction, which is in violation of international law. Next, we need effective participation, not a fig leaf of participation. Participation is not a gift. It's not a gift given to other states. It's the very foundation, the prerequisite for an effective response that the international community can mount to successive crises plaguing the international system, so as to ensure that common ownership is taken of international decisions. Furthermore, we cannot accept that Africa and Arab states to date have no permanent representative on the Security Council nor enjoy the related prerogatives. We endorse the said declaration and the Eswatini Consensus to repair the historical injustice done to the African continent. Genuine participation is only possible if there is deep-rooted reform of the international financial architecture and of international financing institutions. We must modernize multilateral development banks and their practices and bolster access of developing countries to concessional funding, especially in the face of crises. We support the SG's appeal to make the Bretton Woods institutions fairer to developing states. There is no alternative to a common approach so as to address growing sovereign debt of developing countries. This can be done by buttressing existing mechanisms, strengthening their effectiveness, but also establishing new mechanisms, helping low and middle-income countries. What's also important is debt swaps. These must be broadened so as to address debt distress and help these countries achieve sustainable development. Economic justice can only be done if we place the priority on Africa's development. This is how we can guarantee that we prevent conflict and ensure lasting peace. When we held the presidency of the Steering Committee of Heads of State and Government of the African Development Commission, as well as the presidency of His Excellency President El-Sisi, post-conflict reconstruction on the African continent was front of mind. And Egypt will seek to accelerate the development process so as to achieve the African Union's 2063 agenda. This brings me to my third point and principle. Exchange of resources between states, some of which have a comparative advantage, requires us to adopt the principle of common but differentiated responsibility, especially as regards climate change. Governance and natural resources are limited. Mounting climate challenges is clearly linked to, and our ability to solve it is clearly linked to the types and amounts of financial assistance that's provided, as well as the technologies that are made available for climate challenges to be tackled at the national level. National ownership of climate projects is a guarantee that we align domestic priorities with the Sustainable Development Goals, with due regard for the environmental, economic, and social dimensions, ensuring that the transformation, the green transition, is equitable and does not scupper our efforts to eradicate poverty. This was our priority at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. Our compass, our North Star, as we seek to achieve effective and practical solutions, is the agreement on the loss and damage mechanism, which aims to help developing countries which are hardest hit by climate change. Fourth, the principle of participation and shared responsibility goes hand in hand with a rejection of unilateralism in the management of global resources and the settlement of disputes that stem from these resources. For instance, transboundary watercourses is a case in point. There's a global water crisis that's affecting Egypt, inter alia. Egypt is a densely populated country located in an arid zone. It is heavily reliant on the Nile to be able to respond to its mounting water needs. The principle of cooperation with the Nile Basin brother countries encapsulates Egypt's approach to better management of our common resources with a view to securing our interests in keeping with international law and ensuring equitable and sustainable use of resources without any consequences for the downstream countries. We'll continue to work so as to attract foreign investment for development projects in keeping with the various rules, including in the Nile Basin. Despite our genuine efforts, Ethiopia has been insisting stubbornly, misportraying the facts, and starting up the Renaissance Dam, beginning operations without due regard for international law, nor the opinions of millions of people living downstream in Egypt and in Sudan. Following 13 years of vain negotiations, Ethiopia took a unilateral decision in blatant violation of international law, specifically the 2015 Declaration of Principles, the Security Council presidential statement issued in 2021. Well, in fact, in December 2023, negotiations came to a standstill. Egypt will continue to monitor the commissioning of this dam, the filling of this dam. We will be following this very closely. We will keep the Charter in mind and will take all necessary measures so as to secure the interests of our people and our very existence. Egypt will not tolerate any existential threats. Those who do not recognize this are mistaken. Moving on. The world needs the United Nations to address emerging challenges, such as challenges in the digital sphere, cybercrime, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence. These new challenges shouldn't detract from our key purposes, that is collective security. This is absolutely vital. This is the very raison d'etre of the organization, the maintenance of international peace and security. The collective security system, including the disarmament and non-proliferation system, has been weakened. Direct or tacit threats of use of nuclear weapons is no longer a chimera. It's a direct threat. We've seen this in the war in the Gaza Strip. We're seeing this day in, day out. As states possessing nuclear weapons are modernizing their arsenals and indirectly threatening the use of nuclear weapons without any genuine, serious efforts being made to create a world free of nuclear weapons or areas free of nuclear weapons or other WMDs and acceding to the NPT. And this despite the NPT review conference's conclusions, specifically the 1995 decision on the Middle East. We live in a region that's particularly hard hit by the imbalance in the collective security system. This is something that's drawn everyone's attention, and we regret this. That is the increase in Security Council resolutions establishing peacekeeping operations. And this despite the fact that the Security Council is unable to stop this scourge that is conflicts, this disease, nor can it treat the symptoms. And for that reason, the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has described the United Nations as an organization babysitting these conflicts. Speaking of conflicts and upheavals in neighboring countries, as well as throughout the North Mediterranean, all the way through to the Horn of Africa in the south, we're particularly committed to strengthening the UN's role so as to address the root causes of conflicts. We need to ensure that peace is maintained, but also we need to sustain peace. This requires states to respect the unity and territorial integrity of other states. We also need national ownership of decisions without anything being imposed by external actors. This applies to all crises in the region: Sudan, Somalia, Libya. The way to resolve crises is to strengthen state institutions through comprehensive political processes so as to fill these political and security vacuums which are being exploited by certain political and confessional forces, by regional and international parties who want to extend their influence at the expense of people and states in the region. Egypt would like to reiterate the importance of supporting an overarching political process so as to address the crisis in Sudan with due respect for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of that country, Sudan. We must also preserve its institutions, its national state bodies. We support the political settlement in Libya with national ownership thereof. The transition should proceed with parliamentary and presidential elections held concurrently and as swiftly as possible. We are hopeful that by pooling our efforts and endorsing the new UN mission in Somalia, we'll be able to preserve security and stability in that country in keeping with what its people and its government want. We condemn all unilateral measures threatening Somalia's unity, its sovereignty, extending across its territory. Egypt attaches particular importance to capacity building in our brother nations across Africa, together with the United Nations, through the International Conflict Settlement Center, as well as the Egyptian Partnership Agency that works on development. Egypt is committed to working hand in hand with our regional and international partners so as to restore equality and to combat double standards, as well as international hypocrisy, and to revitalize the international system, the multilateral system, implementing the various principles I enumerated in keeping with the principles enshrined in the UN Charter. We will be shouldering our responsibilities as part of the humanitarian response that must be mounted to address crises in our region. We're the third country in terms of refugee applications in 2023. Under the leadership of our President El-Sisi, we've been bearing the brunt of the burden, supporting our brothers from other Arab states and African states. Over 10 million refugees are currently being hosted in Egypt. However, there are certain limits which cannot be exceeded because of the burden this implies. The international community is therefore duty-bound to fill the funding gap and to mobilize the requisite resources so as to address the issue of humanitarian operations and meet the needs of refugees fleeing conflict in various countries. Despite international crises and challenges coming one after the other and the ongoing rise in the number of migrants, Egypt will continue its efforts so as to bolster its human capital. We will do this through a national dialogue. We are prioritizing human rights and democracy. And we're not doing this to please external players. We are doing this to fulfill the aspirations of our people, young people, as well as women, so as to achieve gender parity as well. We've just adopted the first national action plan on women, peace and security. We will be implementing our national strategy on human rights. Furthermore, we'll continue working to maintain peace and security in our region and the world over, inspired by the values of the Egyptian civilization. A majestic, long-standing civilization. Our young people will take forward this vision. They're the ones who will craft the future and preserve human lives without any discrimination on the basis of race, gender, or otherwise, all within the international multilateral system. I thank you.
I thank the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Immigration, and the Egyptian Expatriates of Egypt. We have heard